on Confronting the Unknown. In his book Deep Survival: Who Lives, Who Dies, and Why, Lawrence Gonzalez recounts the story of 17-year-old Julianne Kopke, who was seated next to her mother on a flight with 90 other passengers when the plane was struck by lightning, causing it to go into a nosedive. The next thing Kopke recalled was being strapped into her seat, but outside the plane, hurtling earthward toward the canopy of the Peruvian jungle. What would you think if you were in Kopke's place at that moment? Gonzalez tells us that Kopke's mind was not filled with shrieking terror, or a hastily pulled together prayer, or feelings of regret. No, Kopke remembered thinking that the jungle trees below looked just like cauliflowers. She passed out while still falling, and when she regained consciousness sometime later, she was on the ground, still strapped into her seat. Her collarbone was broken. There was no sign of anyone else. She decided that the planes and helicopters she could hear flying above would never be able to see her because the trees nearly blocked out the sky, so she began to walk out of the jungle. Central to Gonzalez's thesis about resiliency is that those who survive a life-threatening crisis see the future as unmapped. Kopke, falling 2 miles upside down through a storm, didn't think the obvious thought that her life was coming to an end. Instead, she was struck by the appearance of the Peruvian forest from above, and when she came to later, having crashed through the canopy, she didn't think, or didn't only think, the obvious thought about what lay ahead for a 17-year-old girl without her glasses, walking alone in a jungle, barefoot, slapping the ground with her one remaining shoe to frighten off the snakes that she couldn't see well enough to avoid. She walked for 11 days while she was, as Gonzalez described it, being literally eaten alive by leeches and strange tropical insects. On the 11th day, Kopke found a hut and collapsed inside. The next day, as chance would have it, 3 hunters discovered her and got her to a doctor. Gonzalez is interested in this question. Why did Kopke survive this crash, while the other survivors took the same 11 days to sit down and die? Gonzalez identifies a number of reasons, besides blind luck, for Kopke's survival. First, rather than follow rules, she improvised. Second, although she was afraid, as the other survivors surely were, she used that fear as a resource for action. And third, while better equipped travelers succumbed to much lesser challenges, Kopke had an inner resource, a state of mind, that allowed her to make do with what the moment offered. Gonzalez pursues his research further. He finds other traits that resilient people share in common. They use fear to focus their thoughts. They find humor in their predicaments. They remain positive. The list goes on, but the item that most interests us is Gonzalez's admonition that to survive a crisis, one must see the beauty in the new situation. Survivors are attuned to the wonder of the world. The appreciation of beauty, the feeling of awe, opens the senses. When you see something beautiful, your pupils actually dilate. This appreciation not only relieves stress and creates strong motivation, but it allows you to take in new information more effectively. When we first read this, we wondered, if it's possible for someone to be attuned to the beauty of the world when confronted by a situation that is life-threatening, could writers in far less dire circumstances cultivate this attunement as a habit of mind? Here's why this connection suggested itself to us. From our years teaching writing, we know how terrifying and humbling the confrontation with the blank screen and the flashing cursor can be. for beginning writers and experienced writers alike. This confrontation is not life-threatening, of course, but it can nevertheless trigger fears. Do I have anything worth saying? Can I make myself understood? Will the struggle be worth it in the end? These questions arise because the act of writing, when used as a technology for thinking new thoughts, takes us to the edge of our own well-marked paths and points us toward the uncharted realms beyond. Ultimately, each time a writer sits down to write, he or she chooses just how far to venture into that unknown territory. To our way of thinking, the writing prompt, properly conceived, is an invitation to embark into unmapped worlds, to improvise, to find unexpected beauty in the challenges that arise when the writer ventures into the unknown. We know from experience, though, that learning to approach writing this way takes practice, and that without such practice, beginning writers reject the invitation to explore and produce writing that huddles around whatever is obvious and easiest to defend. We have designed the practice sessions in this book to help you use your writing to bring you to the edge of your understanding, to the innumerable places where you can encounter what is unknown to you. The more you practice using your writing in this way, the further you will be able to take your explorations. You'll find yourself moving from writing about what is unknown to you to what is more generally unknown to others, and then on to what may well be unknowable. Making this journey again and again is the essence of the examined life. The writing you do along the way tracks your ongoing encounter with the complexity of human experience. The more you do it, the more you know. And the more you know, the more connections you can make as you work through your next encounter with what is unknown to you. You'll never make it to absolute knowledge, but the more you practice, the more comfortable you'll be with saying, I don't know, but I'm sure I can figure it out. Or so we say. We can pose our position as a challenge. Can you make your writing trigger an inner journey that is akin to falling from a plane over the Amazon, with everything that seemed solid and certain just moments ago suddenly giving way, question leading to question until you land on the fundamental question, what do I know with certainty? We all can count on being faced with challenges of comparable magnitude over the course of our lives, by the death of those we love, the experiences of aging, disease, separation, and suffering, a crisis in faith, a betrayal of trust. Writing, properly practiced, is one way to cultivate the habits of mind found in those who are resilient in moments of crisis. Openness, optimism, calm, humor, and delight in beauty. Practice session 1. Experiencing the unexpected. Habits: beginning, connecting, orienting. Activities: reflecting, remembering, writing. One could say that seeing the future as unmapped is something children do, and that part of growing up is learned to have reasonable expectations about what the future holds. What interests Gonzalez are the differences between how survivors and non-survivors respond once disaster strikes. When the plane you're in splits in half miles above the earth, it's reasonable to assume that your future is mapped. You're going to die. Gonzalez's contention is that those who respond to disaster by suspending their sense that the future is known have, perhaps paradoxically, a better chance of surviving. The thing is, you don't know how you're going to respond to hugely significant and unexpected events until they happen. What is the most unexpected event that has taken place in your life so far? What made it unexpected? How did you respond to this confrontation with the unknown? In the end, did you settle into the moment, or did your sense of what the future held remain constant and unshaken? Spend 30 minutes writing a profile of how you responded to the unexpected. Feel free to discuss what you would do differently if given another chance, knowing now what you didn't know then. Practice session 2, experiencing unexpected thoughts. Habits, beginning, connecting, reflecting. Activities, reflecting, remembering, writing. The kinds of crises that interest Gonzalez have a cinematic quality to them. Planes split apart in midair, a hiker is trapped miles from anyone else, with his arm pinned by a boulder, a mountain climber dangles over the edge of a cliff, his partner unable to pull him to safety. Indeed, the last two cases have been made into major motion pictures. But writers rarely find themselves in predicaments of this kind. Their crises tend to be internal and to center on getting to the heart of a matter, finding a way to express a fugitive thought or fugitive truth, struggling to put a new thought into words. What has been the most striking event in your mental life? A crisis of faith? An existential crisis? A realization that your way of thinking about love or friendship, truth or beauty, justice or politics, or any other of the concepts that are central to human experience was grounded in a false assumption? How did you respond to this confrontation with the unknown? What happened to your experience of time while this event unfolded? Did you find yourself living from moment to moment, or did your sense of what the future held remain clear? Spend at least an hour writing a profile of how you responded to the most striking event in your mental life. Feel free to discuss what you would do differently if given another chance, knowing now what you didn't know then. Practice session 3. Rebecca Solnit confronts the unexpected. Habits, beginning, connecting, paying attention. Activities, analyzing, annotating, reading. In Occupied Territory, included in the reading section, pages 302 through 308, Rebecca Solnit begins with an unexpected event. On a nature hike, lost in her thoughts, she's suddenly confronted by a large, angry, snarling dog. In tales of survival and resiliency, it is common to stress the hardships confronted and overcome, as well as acts of courage and ingenuity. As you read Solnit's thoughts after her frightening encounter with the dog off its leash, how would you characterize her way of responding to the shock she has received? In writing up your analysis, make certain to map Solnit's mental movements across the entire essay. Where does she go after telling the story about the dog and its owner? Where is she when she ends her essay? Practice session 4, exploring the edge of understanding. Habits, beginning, exploring, questioning. Activities, mapping, writing. How we respond to the unknown can take many forms. In The Edge of Identity, included in the reading section at the end of this book, Rachel Aviv chronicles the efforts of Hannah Upp's family and friends to make sense of her repeated disappearances. In The Fourth State of Matter, published in The New Yorker in 1996, Joanne Beard is halfway through her essay describing her day in detail before she reveals that it's November 1st, 1991, the last day of the first part of my life. In An Epidemic of Fear, How Panicked Parents Skipping Shots Endanger Us All, published in Wired, 2009, Amy Wallace presents the anti-vaccination movement as a challenge to traditional science that crosses party, class, and religious lines. In each instance, the writers present a case study of an encounter with the unknown and subsequent efforts to make sense of responses to that encounter. Select one of these 3 essays and write a piece that tracks the writer's response to her encounter with the unknown. What does the writer know at the end of her piece that she didn't know at the beginning?